Many brothers have lost a close friend in their lifetime and have not dealt with the loss in a healthy manner. I'm one of them, right? Please share healthy ways brothers can deal with grief.
It's tough, man. You know, I know what I've lost brothers who've passed. I've lost brothers who are living. I think brothers could relate to that. What I will say is that not everybody doesn't grieve the same. Grief looks different. There's not a book. There's many books about grief, but grief looks different because you have a different life. You have a different relationship with that person. You have different tools. But what I will say for brothers is that no matter what it looks like, you have to have a process. You have to have something to grieving, right? An ideal case is that I think often for many brothers, it's a fear. Let's talk about the barriers. The barriers is, because of our mind, we're very utilitarian. What good is this? What good is me crying out? Like, what good is this going to do? Is this constructive? So we don't see the value pragmatically. Like, if I'm just sitting here and cry, let me just move on with my life. I don't see what good is that. And I think that's a barrier that I think we have to acknowledge, because we know in our wiring that's kind of like a weakness to say, I don't see the benefit of that, right? But what's also scary is that you also don't see the damage, because you're blind to it. You think it's normal the way you're responding to such and such, or the fact that you're down, but you don't even know. You don't even know how you're sideswiping people or how you're driving out of your lane, right? And so I think that's the other side of it, to say, I don't see the value of it, but I'm like, yeah, you don't see the detriment either. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that sometimes the fear is, I don't know, I'm afraid of that. I don't know if I'm going to come back out from that thing. Like, if I open that up, I'd rather not open up that Pandora's box, because the feelings that are associated with it, I'm scared. No, none of us, I'm kind of stoic brother, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes you don't, the reality is like sometimes a lot of fear to say, like, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how I'm gonna come back up from that, or it hurts that bad. Everybody knows, let's talk grief. I'm gonna hold this up and keep going with this. If you ever had a heartbreak in your life, brothers, man, it was just like, you know what I'm saying? Everybody remembers the Waiting to Exhale soundtrack. That was for everybody. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, baby. You know, like, or Cam, can't stop. Like, every brother or sister knows that when you had a heartbreak, a real heartbreak, that it's a physical pain. And you feel like you about to die. But that's grief. And sometimes when you feel something that scary, or you felt that before, you're like, I don't want to deal with anything near that anymore. And so sometimes that's the reality, that I don't even want to deal with that. I think what brothers can do is the reality of saying, like, I think there's step one, and then there's ultimate. One is setting your expectations that I may have this grief for the rest of my life, but this grief will not have me for the rest of my life. There's a difference. And so meaning that, you know, especially if it's a loved one, that means your heart works. And so I may have these feelings, and I may have these feelings, but I will not be completely consumed by them. It gets better day by day. It can. It may not be linear, but I have to have the right expectation. If I have an expectation that it's going to go away, or that I'm never not going to feel bad, or I'm just going to overcome it and not feel anything, you're setting yourself up for deeper darkness, right? So to have the expectation to say, you know what? It's actually a testimony that I loved well. I cared for them, or they had that such of an impact. Man, anytime brothers know, man, anytime sometimes I see some Kobe interviews, man, hey, you know what I'm saying? It's tough. Because I'm just like, Kobe had such an impact. That hit brothers. That was the first time for many brothers that they publicly were open about their pain. Similarly, well, that's Kobe, you ain't related to him. Or you ain't. So if there's somebody in your life that has that standing, there's a view to say, okay, I could do that. I think that there's other piece around now, having brothers. Because brothers oftentimes, whether you have a brother or not, I think often they're the greatest first step to share. Right? To share and just be honest about that. And I think because brothers know the nuances of kind of like sharing it. Often a brother who's been through that before, right? Who's unnavigated. I know a brother, you know, one of my good brothers, man, who like lost his wife, widowed. And it wasn't until he spoke to another brother who lost his wife that he kind of was like, he's able to breathe a little bit more, because he saw somebody living and he moved on with his life, and because he knows what he's been through. Especially when you talk about grief, loss, brother loss. somebody who's lost as well. Internal, some brothers may be hearing this and be like, hey man, well, I don't really got cats like that I could open up to. We talk about process. In the Bible, it talks about when Moses passed away, they had 30 days of mourning, grief, like 30 specific days. And after that, they moved on. I'm pretty sure cats were still crying after the 30 days. But their point was that they at least had a dedicated time. And so the illustration I always give is like when you break a bone. If you break a bone, that first few weeks to when you actually do the surgery and set it back in place is critical. Because if you don't set that in place, it's going to heal in the wrong direction. And you may have a limp, or you may have an ailment that stays with you, or it's a lot more pronounced. Similarly, that 30-day period, or that period at least to acknowledge, is almost like setting the bone in place, right? To say, I'm just acknowledging that, and every day doing something. It could look different for you. It may be like, man, this song reminds me of my boy, or I'm just going to sit here in silence. It may be 5 minutes. I had a couple of cats I walked through grief. And we actually spent every day, the accountability was every day we did something for 30 days. And after that, I'm like, you can do what you want, right? Some days for them, annually they memorialize it. Some part of it, they do something different or fun on the day that reminds them so they can continue to redeem. But they had that 30-day period, and it was like night and day.
You have to do something.
You have to do something, because if you don't do something, that something is doing something to you.